U.S. President Donald Trump is making a new threat against Canada tonight, taking aim at a new border crossing. The Gordie Howe Bridge will connect Windsor, Ontario and Detroit, and it's set to open this year.
The opening of the nearly $6.5 billion bridge, funded entirely by Canada, is under threat tonight. Donald Trump declaring on social media he will try to block the opening of the Gordie Howe International Bridge.
Something extraordinary unfolded at one of North America's most critical crossings, and hardly anyone saw it coming. A single political threat suddenly pulled a massive international infrastructure project into a much larger fight over power, trade, and economic leverage. What followed revealed how fragile modern supply chains really are, how quickly alliances can be tested, and how a bridge meant to unite two economies nearly became a bargaining chip in a geopolitical showdown. This story connects factories, financial agreements, border politics, and billions in public investment. And it raises uncomfortable questions about who truly controls the arteries of global commerce. The tension began when Donald Trump publicly floated the idea of blocking the opening of the Gordie Howe International Bridge, a project that took more than a decade of planning and billions of dollars to build. That single statement immediately changed the stakes. Overnight, a transportation project became a flashpoint in a much wider dispute over trade policy, sovereignty, and economic pressure. Canada did not answer with shouting matches or dramatic press conferences. Instead, Ottawa turned to Mark Carney, a leader known for navigating financial crises rather than chasing headlines. His response carried weight because it was grounded in documented agreements, economic realities, and the shared interests of both countries. At the center of this confrontation stands the Gordie Howe International Bridge, a next-generation trade corridor connecting Windsor and Detroit. On paper, it is infrastructure. In practice, it functions as one of the most strategically important commercial arteries on the planet. Nearly 1/4 of all trade between Canada and the United States moves through this region, much of it tied directly to automotive manufacturing, advanced industrial supply chains, and energy logistics. Every day, components cross this border repeatedly before a finished vehicle ever reaches a showroom. Engines, transmissions, electronics, and structural parts travel back and forth through this corridor several times during assembly. Interrupt that flow, even briefly, and entire production lines grind to a halt. Costs surge. Delivery schedules collapse. Within weeks, billions of dollars in economic activity can freeze. What makes this bridge especially remarkable is who paid for it. Canada financed virtually the entire project. That includes the bridge itself, customs plazas, highway connections, and supporting infrastructure on both sides of the border. The total cost reached approximately $6.4 billion. Michigan did not contribute construction funding. Instead, under a 2012 agreement between Canada and the state of Michigan, Canada assumed the upfront cost in exchange for toll revenue until the investment is recovered. After that point, Michigan becomes eligible to collect 50% of the net toll proceeds going forward. That agreement was not hidden in fine print. It was negotiated openly and signed by Michigan's Republican governor at the time, Rick Snyder. In 2013, the United States Department of State issued the required presidential permit allowing construction to move forward. In 2017, Trump and Justin Trudeau released a joint statement describing the bridge as a vital economic link between the two nations. 2 years later, Trump signed legislation that included $15 million in U.S. customs funding for the project. This was not some surprise initiative that appeared overnight. It passed through formal regulatory channels, survived court challenges, and received bipartisan support. Then came February 9, 2026. Trump posted on Truth Social, claiming Canada owned both sides of the bridge and suggesting the United States should be compensated before allowing it to open. He tied the threat to broader grievances, including Ontario's ban on American alcohol sales in provincial stores, Canada's dairy protections, and Carney's recent trade agreement with China that reduced Chinese tariffs on Canadian canola from 85% to 15% while opening roughly $7 billion in new export opportunities. Washington characterized that China deal as hostile. Suddenly, the bridge became leverage. The problem with that framing surfaced almost immediately. Canada does not own both sides of the bridge. Michigan owns half under the 2012 agreement. Michigan received that ownership stake without paying for construction. American steel was used. American workers built much of the U.S. side. These facts were documented years earlier and had not changed. Windsor Mayor Drew Dilkins reacted with disbelief. Rick Snyder went further, publishing a detailed column in the Detroit News correcting Trump point by point. Snyder explained that Michigan secured half ownership of a multi-billion-dollar asset without upfront cost, and that blocking the bridge would primarily harm Michigan workers, Michigan businesses, and the state's auto industry. To understand why Snyder's reaction carried weight, it helps to look at what existed before this project. For nearly a century, commercial traffic between Detroit and Windsor relied almost entirely on the Ambassador Bridge, built in 1929. The bridge is privately owned by the Marone family, who acquired it in 1979. Because the Detroit-Windsor Tunnel prohibits heavy trucks, the Ambassador Bridge became a near monopoly for commercial freight, generating more than $60 million annually in toll revenue for decades. Momentum for a publicly owned second crossing did not arrive quietly, and once it started building, the resistance followed fast. The billionaire Marone family poured money into stopping it, spending roughly $30 million on a Michigan ballot initiative that would have forced statewide approval for any new international bridge. Voters shut that down by nearly 60%. Lawsuits came next, all arguing exclusive rights to the corridor, and every one of them failed, including an appeal the Supreme Court refused to hear. During Donald Trump's first term, ads even ran on Fox and Friends urging him to cancel the project. He did not. Years later, when Trump suddenly threatened to block the opening of the Gordie Howe International Bridge, the timing raised eyebrows across Michigan. The busiest northern border crossing in the country sits between Detroit and Windsor, moving billions in manufacturing and agricultural goods every single day, along with essential workers and professionals who keep both economies running. National security experts have long warned that relying on one privately owned toll bridge, the Ambassador Bridge, creates risk, higher costs, and supply chain vulnerability. Then reports surfaced. The New York Times cited officials who said Matthew Marone met with Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick, who later called the president. Within hours, Trump posted online about blocking the completed bridge. Debbie Dingell told the Detroit Free Press she had been informed of that meeting before Trump's announcement, though neither Lutnick nor Marone confirmed it. Trump demanded Canada hand over at least half ownership of the bridge, despite the fact that Michigan already holds joint ownership under a long-standing agreement. Former Governor Rick Snyder helped negotiate that deal years ago, after Republican lawmakers refused to fund the project and political pressure from wealthy donors kept stalling progress. Canada stepped in, fronted the construction costs, and agreed to recover the investment through tolls, making the bridge possible at a time when federal funding was scarce, well before Joe Biden's infrastructure bill. That partnership was built on trust, something many leaders now worry would not exist under today's climate. The bridge represents far more than a new crossing. It strengthens manufacturing, supports farmers, reduces congestion, and protects supply chains that Michigan families depend on. That is why business leaders, labor unions, automakers, small businesses, national security experts, and state officials across party lines have rallied behind it. Trump narrowly carried Michigan in 2024, yet tariffs have cost manufacturing jobs, farmers are struggling, healthcare and everyday expenses are rising, and businesses face growing uncertainty. Now, a nearly finished project risks becoming collateral damage in a political favor for a billionaire donor, while Republican candidates in Michigan continue defending it. It's time to open the Gordie Howe International Bridge and celebrate the win with our friends in Canada. Moreover, when Trump threatened to block the Gordie Howe Bridge, Snyder pointed out an uncomfortable reality. If the new bridge were delayed or canceled, the primary beneficiary would not be American workers or taxpayers. It would be the private owner whose monopoly would remain intact. Michigan's political response was swift and unusually unified. Senator Alyssa Slotkin warned that canceling the project would damage Michigan businesses, disrupt supply chains, and raise costs for consumers. Governor Gretchen Whitmer emphasized that the bridge supports jobs, strengthens the auto industry, and reflects bipartisan cooperation financed by Canada and built by union workers from both countries. Even Michigan House Speaker Matt Hall acknowledged publicly that the existing bridge is owned by an American family and suggested those owners could become targets of retaliation from Canada. Behind the political statements sat a much larger economic reality. Companies like Ford Motor Company, General Motors, and Stellantis operate deeply integrated cross-border production systems. A single vehicle may require parts to cross the Detroit-Windsor corridor half a dozen times during assembly. Delays translate directly into lost productivity and higher costs. The Ambassador Bridge forces trucks to move through Windsor city streets before reaching highways, creating congestion and inefficiency. The Gordie Howe Bridge solves that by linking directly to Ontario, Highway 401, and Interstate 75, creating a freeway-to-freeway connection that removes urban bottlenecks. A University of Windsor study estimated the new crossing could reduce commercial transit times by up to 20 minutes per trip. Over 30 years, that efficiency could save approximately $2.3 billion for trucking companies and the industries they serve, including American manufacturers and agricultural exporters. Redundancy matters too. With only one truck-capable crossing, any disruption to the Ambassador Bridge creates immediate vulnerability. Mechanical failure, protests, or structural issues can halt commercial traffic entirely. The new bridge provides a second route, strengthening resilience for both economies. Against that backdrop, Carney handled Trump's threat with deliberate restraint. He called Trump directly the next morning. He laid out 4 simple facts. Canada financed the bridge, Michigan shares ownership under the 2012 agreement. American and Canadian steel were used, and workers from both nations built it. He said he looked forward to its opening. Later on, Parliament Hill, Carney described the bridge as an example of cooperation and emphasized its importance for commerce and tourism. He asked U.S. Ambassador Pete Hoekstra, a Michigan native, to help keep dialogue constructive. The White House responded by saying it was unacceptable for Canada to own the bridge fully, a claim already contradicted by Michigan officials and the written agreement. What changed between Trump's earlier praise of the project and his later threat was not the bridge itself. The ownership structure stayed the same. The permit stayed valid. The financing model remained unchanged. What shifted were trade tensions and political calculations. Subscribe to the channel for in-depth breakdowns on the forces shaping global trade, infrastructure, and political power. Because stories like this rarely end where the headlines stop. Turn on notifications so future videos don't get buried by the algorithm. See you in the next one.